There is a context to this prophecy of Miriam regarding the beginnings of the fulfillment of the promises made at the Brit Ben Habatarim, which adds a deeper dimension to the Gemara in SOTAH. It also responds to a textual anomaly regarding the opening pasuk of Perek Bet of Sefer Shmot. In that pasuk we are told that Vayelech ish mebeit Levi, Vayikach et bat Levi. We are not told of their real names. As it turns out, however, the ish mebeit Levi is Amram, the bat Levi is Yochevet. The word Vayikach has a number of translations depending upon the context in which it is used. Normally, Lamed Kuf Chet means to take, implying a movement from position to position. It also has a connotation of ownership, forced ownership in the form of capturing, and buried into the options is the act of marriage, which in ancient times had a particular legal connotation. So what we have here is a statement to the effect that an ish mibeit Levi, Amram, marries a bat Levi, Yochevet, and that Vatahar ha'isha vateled ben, a child was born. This child is described as Kitovhu, a good child, and that they were able to hide this child for a period of 3 months. Aside from the textual anomaly of describing a 3-month-old child as Tov, which at least on the surface has no bearing upon the narrative, certainly not upon the statement of hiding the child for a period of 3 months, there's another overarching difficulty relating to the statement that Vayikach et bat Levi. If we are going to take the pasuk as presented, we have previously identified the ish mibeit Levi as Amram, who marries the bat Levi Yochevet. They have their child, whom they are able to hide for 3 months, who they then place amongst the reeds of the Nile River. The problem that we have with this scenario is that this couple already had 2 children before the birth of Moshe. In fact, that after the child was placed amongst the reeds in the Nile River, that his sister Miriam stood watch from a distance, which, according to the Pshuta Shel Mikra, was Ladeya ma yeyaseh lo, what would become of him. But there is, of course, the Midrashic interpretation for this statement, which ties into the larger picture, Miriam's prophecy regarding the Geula. Nevertheless, we do have a problem with the statement Vayikach et bat Levi, that Amram married Yochevet and gave birth to Moshe, for which we have either the option that Miriam and Aharon were born out of wedlock, which Rashi rejects in favor of an alternative option, that the Vayikach was a remarriage, and along with a midrashic fill-in, touches upon the moral issue of bringing children into the world for which they will be doomed to die because of political circumstances. The midrashic fill-in links the opening pasuk of Vayelech ish mibeit Levi to the concluding pasuk of Perek Aleph, namely the decree that Kol haben hayilod hayaora tashlichuhu, that any male child that was to be born, and which, by the way, from the standpoint of Medrash, applied to both the children born to Jewish and non-Jewish families, Egyptian families, that child would need to die. Faced with the issue of bringing children into a world for which they might face certain death if they were a male, Amram, belonging to the tribe of Levi, and who by this time had attained a position of authority within the ethnic group of Bnei Yisrael, made an executive decision, and that was, rather than bring children into the world for which they might face certain death, he decided to formally divorce his wife, Yochevet. In doing so, he had hoped that his people would follow suit, and thereby circumventing the decree of Paro. And this is where we place into the mouth of Miriam 2 arguments in which she took issue with her father. Her first argument was her father's decree was far more severe than that of Pharaoh. Pharaoh decreed only against the males, not against the females, by separating from his wife and thereby becoming a role model for the entire nation. He was, in effect, going beyond Pharaoh's decree, in that we are precluding the birth of both males and females. And furthermore, we have the Nevuah. Through this separation from Yochevet, he is undermining the Geula process, in that the future redeemer of the nation from Egypt would not be born. Miriam's arguments resonated well with her father, And at this point in time, Shmot 2, Pasuk 1 picks up the storyline that Vayelech ish mibeit Levi, that Amram then goes, Vayikach, and remarries at Bat Levi, his former wife Yocheved. Child is born. They see that Kitov Hu, which we midrashically linked to the Shekhinah, and Amram ultimately acknowledges and gives credit to his daughter. Amad Aviyahu Neshaka al Rosha. The father goes over to his daughter, embraces her, Amarla, and tells her, Biti, my daughter, Nitkayema Nevuatech, your prophecy regarding our child Moshe, and the link between his birth and the release of Bnei Israel from Egypt, has been fulfilled. A first reading of the Rashi suggests that this is the issue addressed by Rashi in his commentary, when under the heading of Atikach Miriam Hanaviyah he asks, Hechan nit nava'ah, where do we find in the text that Miriam offered any form of prophecy? And borrowing from Masechet SOTAH, he answers his rhetorical question, Kushahaita achot Aaron kodem shenolad Moshe. The prophecy took place when she was the sister of Aharon prior to the birth of Moshe, where Amra, she said, Atida imi shetelet ben, that at some time in the future my mother will give birth to a child, chulhu, etc., which includes the entire sequence of events recorded in detail in Masechet SOTAH. To the question of Heichen nit nava'ah, Rashi answers that the Achot Aaron does not modify the family relationship between Miriam and her siblings, but rather modifies the Nevuah aspect of this descriptive of Miriam. And then Rashi provides a second option for the Achot Aaron, drawn from the Mechilta, that relates to a special bond that existed between Miriam and Aharon, recorded in Bamidbar Perek Yudbet.